what if we all lived at the population density of Manhattan? How much space would 8 billion people take up? The answer is the state of New Mexico. So most people don't say, oh, I don't want to live like Manhattanites. They go, is that it? So it's not about population per se, it's about land use and resource consumption. I just want to try to present it in a way that goes, that's all it would take. We fit into the size of the state of New Mexico. It shifts your mind a little bit, and maybe that's all I can do. And then it's really up to everybody to say, we don't have to go down this road. There's another way. There's so many different plausible future scenarios we could take. My name is Maya Lin. I split my time between art and architecture, and I'm a committed environmentalist. I think I actually can't remember a time when I wasn't making art. In grade school, we would have to wait, my brother and I, at my dad's ceramic studio, because he started out as a ceramic professor. So my earliest childhood memories are in his studio waiting for him to finish work, playing with clay. And I think art was always just a part of our world, and I think I was always making things, but I was incredibly academic and bookish as well, because that was my mother's influence. But I really thought when I went to college I was going to become a field zoologist, and I spent a lot of my time in grade school, junior high, being a little bit of an environmental activist. So I was like petitioning to ban whale hunting in Japan. I was petitioning to stop steel traps. And so somehow all my art and architecture has very much focused on the environment. So it's all come full circle, but not necessarily the way in which people might have thought I would have turned out. There were two who were pretty important. First is Yale professor Vincent Scully, who taught survey architecture courses and art history courses. Scully really focused us on how much the built environment can really shape emotions, space, democracy. There was a real import to almost a social responsibility within what we make in the public realm that sort of had a lasting impression on me. And then the second would be Frank Gehry. I was really discovering that I couldn't really choose between art and architecture, and I was getting a lot of pushback from the architecture department that I had to make a choice. And Frank just basically said at one point, do not worry about this distinctions, just keep doing what you're doing. So I'm site specific, and therefore I will talk to a lot of people, but one of the very first times I did that was for University of Michigan, and it was for the Aerospace Engineering building, FXB building, and I talked to everyone. I talked to all the faculty, and one of the faculty members had given me this album of fluid motion. So I come across this one image of a repetitive, it's a naturally occurring repetitive wave. So it all looks perfect. It all looks like it was manufactured. And so I just hit this image and I knew that's what the piece would be about. So then I went back to the head of the engineering department and I was presenting the idea, and he said, God, doesn't that belong over in naval engineering? And I had to laugh. He was smiling. And I said, not quite. But then, so now whenever I talk to scientists specifically, I say, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. Probably none of what you tell me is going to go into the piece. But I need to listen and I need to absorb, and then I'm going to come away and sort of do what I feel is right. I will show people a lot of the different iterations, but in the end, I'm just sifting through it. I don't think I've actually been influenced to change a work by what people might say. Two artists that really were kind of very influential were Robert Smithson and Richard Serra. I can actually remember a moment when I came across their works. I was coming out of a nightclub and I had to cut across a rotary, and I hit this Corten steel wall, and it was rotary arc, and it was dark, and I had to walk around the outside perimeter. I just thought it was the most stunning experience. Richard was so knowledgeable about art, about architecture, and then whenever I would get the courage, I had something new that I was experimenting with, I would call Richard up, and he would always come over to the studio, and I think like I was literally beginning to explore the first of the wave fields, and he just looked at it and he said, I don't know what this is, but keep doing it. And then there was a Smithson show at the Whitney. It was in 1981. I had just designed the memorial. I think my brother was interning at the Whitney, and I went up to visit him. I just was mesmerized by Smithson's work. This mapping that he did throughout the West, and then he would pull these rocks from outside and bringing it into the scale of a museum, but you still feel the immensity of what he was trying to pull together with that mapping throughout like an entire region. Just stunned me. I mean, I think the rotary arc and the Smithson spiral jetty, which I've never seen, but again, these pieces and Terrell's Rodin crater, these are three that almost tap into something just as working at a scale that is almost ancient in sensibility or sensitivity. And it brings back another piece that was very important to me growing up in Ohio, the Serpent Mound. You learned about it when you were a school kid in Ohio, but going to see it was just something that was so special to me. That being said, there's another piece that really, and it's both an art museum, but it's an artwork, and it's the Teshima Museum on the island of Teshima. And it just was profound in how beautiful it is and how it just stops you and you have no idea how you're going to react to it. So these are sort of dealing with almost on a subconscious or barely there level of perception that I'm extremely drawn to. I think for me in my own work, both systematic landscapes and then ghost forest are really formative pieces. And from systematic landscapes, it's allowed me to bring what I do outside, inside, and then from there, I started making works inside that then help inform what's outside. Because again, the scale of what I'm doing when I'm in a gallery confine versus out of doors was always one that I've had to balance between the two. And I think Ghost Forest is leading to a whole new body of work that I'm currently focused on. A lot of it deals with root structures and the life of soil, and again, back to my environmental concerns, nature-based solutions to climate change. I think my brother, who's a couple years older than me, and we decided, coming from Ohio, I was first commissioned to do a work for the Cleveland Public Library. And, you know, I have always applied words to certain of my public memorial works. And I kept thinking, well, if I invite my brother in, who's a language poet, Ton Lin, and what if we work back and forth? And what if what he then writes influences me? And the idea that we would create a three-part series, I call it the Ohio Elegy series, for our home state. So the second one was called Input. And again, that one we really influenced each other, so that what he wrote about memory is so influential in what the final form would be. And then the last was for Oberlin, and it's an ecological primer. So all three, we just kept working back and forth. You're gonna make a move, he's gonna make a move, your form is gonna change because of what he says, then what he says slightly changes. And so the three make up our Ohio trilogy. Two works that were very formative for me in college and then graduate school was Borges' Labyrinths and In Praise of Shadows by Tanizaki. Those two works, probably at the moment when I was studying, really kind of freed me up. I was studying architecture at the time, and they really helped me to think of, like, for the Tanizaki book, it was really looking at things that are unseen. And that's why I actually went to Japan to work for Fumihiko Maki, and then I studied in Denmark architecture, because I was trying to get to a very different place with how we're living in the built environment. How do we see architecture? How do we experience architecture? And then how does that relate to how do we live? And I think the Tanizaki book was just brilliant in how it really made you look at sort of the space between things. And I think Borges always been about time and memory, and he plays with that. And I think memory and time have been so much a part of so many of my works. I think for me, the environment and our responsibility to the environment are probably some of the underpinnings of how I see the world and how I relate. And right now, you know, I set up my own not-for-profit foundation called What Is Missing, and I call it my 5th and final memorial. I started it in 2007, but I'll volunteer, I'll give to it for the rest of my life. It exists virtually as a website, but also it's a guerrilla art project. So Ghost Force was part of it. It's not just about what we're losing, it's really about what we can do to help prevent or slow down or mitigate both climate change and biodiversity loss. Nature's extremely resilient. If we give it a chance, it comes back. So we showcase best practices around the world. We showcase where nature has really recovered, as well as highlight just stories of great abundance that have disappeared, but that could possibly come back. So I think science has been almost an underpinning to the way I see the world, and the environment and environmental awareness is something that frames practically everything I do right now. Follow your curiosity. I think art is something that is both an expression of who you are, but you're also a reflection of your time, and you have to kind of walk that balance line. You have to be, in a way, extremely true to yourself as to what you want to imagine and see in the world. Most of the friends I know, they didn't choose to become an artist. It found you. You didn't really have a choice. And in that, finding what your voice is something that it drove me. You know, I was extremely worried that because I didn't choose between art and architecture, and I love their differences, that I'd be schizophrenic. And it was only until about maybe 10, 15 years of working where I really see how my 3 aesthetic processes, it's like a tripod, the memorials, the architecture, and the art, allow me to stand up. All I'm trying to get you to do at times is look around and look at the natural world. So on a fundamental level, can I get you to take a moment, take a pause, and look at it again? And maybe you'll have a relation to it. And again, getting you closer to the natural world. So I have no idea how I'll be seen. I don't really know, but I just, for me, I don't have a choice but to kind of keep doing what I'm doing.